A few years ago, before the release of Fallout 4's Nuka World DLC, I covered some content from that, content that was widely posted online and shared in many facets, and actually ended up getting a copyright strike from Bethesda and ZeniMax. Needless to say, even though somebody sent me this footage from quite a while ago, I've been sitting on it very wary as to whether or not I should post it. But seeing as several other channels have successfully, and even beyond that, people are now successfully glitching into some of these vaults in kind of natural means, I figure now is as good a time as ever to actually share with you an inside look at some of the vaults in Fallout 76. If you don't know, there are 3 vaults around the map: Vault 94, 96, and 63. Bethesda has confirmed that this is going to be the source of future DLC content, although interestingly, even when the game shipped, the interiors of many of these vaults were actually fully populated. You could find various things in them, and they are in different states of completion. Vault 94 pretty much being totally complete outside of the game mode that will go along with it. If you guys enjoy the content, you can leave a like or subscribe, but starting things off, the 3 vaults again are in different stages of completion, with the Vault 94 being by far the most complete, and for that reason I think it's good to start with that one. It also gives a decent idea of the role all 3 of these vaults will actually play. Vault 94 had the most information even outside of the vault, in the terminal you can find sitting there. It discussed how basically this was a vault that did get a plethora of resources. If you go inside, you'll realize it's specifically in the plant resource category, and it was actually a religious congregation that moved in here. The major difference being they didn't have any weapons or really any way to defend themselves, and the vault door was set to open after just 1 year. Working your way in the vault, you can certainly see that things are, well, overgrown. There's a lot of foliage everywhere, and it certainly looks like things kind of got taken over. Almost immediately after entering into the vault, you're going to find the emergency management terminal. This is technically on the surface world, not actually within the greater vault, but this pretty much alludes to what this DLC is going to entail. You'll get the option to begin mission, which then gives you a brief description saying that make sure you and your team have actually assembled and are ready to begin, and once you click the confirm button, the vault door will close and nobody else will be allowed in. After looking through pretty much all of these various vaults, it seems like what's going to go on within them is it's going to be some kind of PvE event that you're meant to play with a couple of other friends. As you make your way further into the vault, you're going to find a pump control system, and it very much so looks like one of those things that's going to be like, alright, here's the center console. There's going to be little things you have to turn on all throughout the vault, and there's probably going to be enemies or some other obstacle preventing you and your team from doing that. Maybe if you complete this in a certain amount of time or try and beat your past time, you get a certain reward or something along those lines. But either way, it certainly seems like it's going to be PvE. I know a lot of people are hoping, oh, maybe there'll be human NPCs in here. There aren't. It seems like everyone is dead in all 3 of these vaults. And actually not explicitly in the vault, but referencing some of the other files you can find within Fallout 76 and things that have been data mined, you'd actually find several vault-themed backpacks. So I wouldn't be surprised if, let's say, you go into these vaults, you have to do these missions, and there's new items added in that you could only unlock through these missions. Things like a backpack that does come in several different colors and has a non-vault themed one and a vault themed one. And based on the entries in the files right now, it certainly seems like these backpacks are going to increase your carry weight, work like a real backpack. And beyond that, other things we have seen being recently edited that seems like they would actually go quite well with the rest of this are those lunchboxes, otherwise known as loot boxes. Lunchboxes have been pretty consistently associated with the vaults. You get the Vault Tech lunchbox all the time in the Fallout games, so I wouldn't be shocked if some of these are actually scattered around some of these areas, or even beyond that, again, actually act as a quest reward. Although in the files, they still do have the Atomic Shop heading, so it seems rather curious that they would actually be in the vault exclusively. And there's also a compound bow, which maybe it's associated with this, but also it could just be for a future DLC. But even beyond that, actually looking around the vaults, these things are massive. Vault 94 in particular. Maybe some of the foliage actually obscures your view and makes it harder to find your way, but there are multiple sections, multiple levels. There's a lot of time you could spend in this thing. And also, even beyond that, there's actually quite a bit of lore and backstory here, like finding out the true purpose of this vault. I don't want to spoil too much about the lore and the actual systems underlying some of these, because I imagine it'll be interesting to discover that yourselves, but the vault experiment in and of itself was a congregation comes here. They don't have weapons, but they have a plethora of resources. The vault door opens on its own after 1 year, but all the while this is going on, a maintenance man is here. Except when you go to that maintenance man's terminal, you find out he wasn't actually a maintenance man, but rather an undercover overseer. The experiment being, how will this otherwise non-violent community actually react to the vault door opening and their task to actually accept in outsiders. One of the other interesting components here that I wouldn't be surprised plays a role in the mission is the actual ballot box and the community proposals they do have. Overtly, this vault didn't actually have an overseer, rather they had a panel that could vote on different proposals. After going into this room, you'll find that you actually are required to have a ID card to vote, but anyone could otherwise. It seems like such a core component, and considering they implemented all of this, I just have to imagine it'll play a role when this eventually does get released. Outside of that, the vault itself is pretty big and pretty cool. You'll notice there's a greenhouse in here. I would love if when this gets released, we get maybe some new plant types in Fallout 76. I feel like that'd be a really nice addition, and maybe you could only get those plant types through this vault, considering they were meant to have a bunch of pre-war options, and then maybe you can't find those outside of the vault anymore. But then even beyond that, the other very interesting part about this is this vault actually contained a GECK. The GECK stands for Garden of Eden Creation Kit. It was a terraforming device that basically allowed you to rebuild society to some extent, giving a user of it the ability to revitalize an area of the wasteland. You can actually find on other terminals outside of Vault 94 that seemingly the GECK was used and failed or exploded in some way. It was this explosion that actually led to the creation of the Mire region, transforming some of the trees and foliage, but also some of the creatures. Within the vault, you could actually find terminal entries discussing the GECK, and you could actually find a GECK itself that's in an interesting state. I have to imagine when it's released, it won't look quite like this. But this is another thing that's such a core component of this vault that you just have to imagine it plays a role in the mission you do complete here. But moving on, we also do have Vault 96. This is probably the second most complete out of all of the vaults on this list, although certainly less complete than the previous one. Vault 96 is notable by the icy or otherwise cold aspect of this, and also this is one of the only ones with enemies that are actively exploring around it. But otherwise, the purpose of this vault was largely that there are only 6 inhabitants of it, and they were tasked with actually revitalizing life in the surrounding region. So they did have storage of embryos for many wildlife that were around before the war. At some point, radiation affected all of these embryos, and then those people were overrun. Again, no survivors for this one either. Something that's pretty interesting with this though, compared to the previous vault or even the final one, this one is significantly more linear. It still is a really big vault, but it definitely seems like as you progress further and further in this, you kind of just go down one select path. Almost immediately after entering this one, you're going to be able to find a new type of syringe for the syringer. It seems almost certain that this is going to play a role in the final variant when you're actually playing this with friends, especially how so many syringers are laid out in this little room, with the syringes also being there. Something interesting about this one though, and maybe it's just further along in some aspects, in the files of Fallout 76, you could actually find more information about the missions here than you could in Vault 94. In Vault 96, it seems like there's either going to be several options for what missions you can complete, or possibly even several stages. At one of the ending terminals, a actually very famous one for what it says, it does say Mission 1 complete, seeming to allude to the fact that there'd be several. But at the same time, maybe it's just a multi-stage process. You complete one mission, go back to the start of the vault, and then start the thing over again. Either way, pretty much all of these missions pertain to the core functionality of this vault, with those new creatures, then the embryos that are there, either clearing out some of the hostile creatures or even taking down some of the robots that are acting inappropriately, with each one actually having a certain time frame associated with it. I wouldn't be shocked if all 3 of these vaults have similar functionality, where they're going to have either multiple stages of a given mission or just multiple missions in general, so you could continue to replay it over and over again. This vault without a doubt has less polish than some of the other ones, but it actually is a pretty cool setup, and one thing I would love to see is a new creature introduced with this. It just seems like it'd be such a great opportunity considering the lore and backstory of this vault and even what you're meant to be doing inside of it. And then finally, that's going to bring us to Vault 63, the least polished of the 3, and actually the one that has the least information about it because many of the terminal entries aren't even populated yet. Actually, looking through Vault 63, it almost looks like a standard or otherwise typical vault. You can see there was definitely a plethora of kids here based on some of the classrooms and even some of the rooms you do find, but even beyond that, considering it is in the Ash Heap region, you could definitely find a lot of things alluding to this also within the vault, such as a giant mining tunnel that seemed to end in tragic means. There's further tunnels all digging into this larger tunnel through some of the various parts of the vault, and I have to imagine this will play a role in the backstory here. Maybe these guys couldn't get out of the vault door shut on them and they were trying to find their own way out, but even beyond that, you could find little fires all throughout the vault, which is rather odd and interesting. I mean, like, how long has this fire been burning for? The layout of this one definitely seems more similar to Vault 94 in the fact that there's a lot of different areas to explore. There's a lot of different rooms you can check out. It seemed to be the smallest of the three, and as you could probably tell, there's no lighting actually implemented yet, which gives it an interesting look. Considering the location and the tunnels, it certainly seems like maybe it'll tie into mole miners in some way. In addition, you could actually find a big generator here. One of the missions you could find from the data mine files actually talks about a reactor malfunction, that being something you and your team will actually have to address, but then also you do get a couple of other missions that are pretty interesting, such as a fire outbreak or even a riot in progress. The riot one in particular, I'm curious, how is that going to work? Perhaps this actually is like the host site of mole miners. It's where they were created or something along those lines. And maybe the riot is mole miners and you're gonna have to tame them, or maybe it's just ghouls, which is kind of anticlimactic. Compared to the other two, Vault 63 certainly seems the most generic out of the bunch, with the only interesting part being that giant mine that I can't really explain. There's also something else found through data mining seemingly alluding to the fact that depending on how many players you have, you'll actually have harder or more enemies spawning per wave. So either way, that's a look at Vault 76's Vault DLC, or at least what we know about it thus far. There's certain things I deliberately left out around this video, especially those around lore and some of the backstory, especially with Vault 94. I don't want to spoil everything, and if you really want to read about it, all of the terminals are posted online, so you can find it that way. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it's going to be one of those events where it's a big door opening and humans leave those vaults. It seems like pretty much everyone is dead, and several of these vaults have opened already, but then for one reason or another actually ended up closing a second time. Either way, this video actually took a long time to make. Again, there's a lot going on in these vaults and a lot of interesting stuff in there also. As always, again, I thank you all for watching. Hopefully you found this video informative or just interesting. And with that, I hope to see you all next time. Later.